So today we're going to talk about how I wrote the content piece, how many people are earning less than the minimum wage, which is a PR piece for the employment solicitor, Duncan and Lewis. So this is an overview of the process. So I just want to remind you of the ideation process behind it. I made a video about this, which I'll link to in the description. But the long and short of it is if you Google in title less than minimum wage, put into Google News, you'll see that even in the last month, there were loads and loads of articles talking about people earning the minimum wage, calling out companies for paying less than the minimum wage. If journalists get information that people are being earned, that people are getting paid less than the minimum wage, they're going to jump on that story. And then I googled how many people earn less than the minimum wage, and you can see in this parliamentary report that the information is about people being paid at or below the minimum wage. There is not actually information out there about people who are just being paid below the minimum wage. So there's a difference there between the demand that the journalists want for this information and what information is actually out there. So if we can create legitimate information about the number of people in the UK being paid less than the minimum wage, then we've got a story on our hands that we can pitch to journalists. So actually creating the article, first thing we have to bear in mind is what the minimum wage is. So it's £11.44 in the UK for people earning over 21. And then you've got to, and then you want to work out like what people are earning. So the first thing I googled was median earnings 2024 Office of National Statistics. So here we go, average weekly earnings. And I downloaded the data set. Which you can get here. Which is here. And this gave you the weekly 2024 earnings. And bear in mind that if the minimum wage is £11.44, then we go 11.44 multiplied by 40, which is 457.6. And we can see here that there are people earning less than the minimum wage, right? And it seems to be in the wholesaling, retail, hotel, and hotel sectors. We can see there. But I know that you want to be able to segment this type of information by things like region, occupation, gender, stuff like that to create stories. So this data, it wasn't segmented enough, it was too general. So I went back to Google and I Googled median earnings by region, Office of National Statistics. And I managed to find this and I downloaded the data there and I got this. So this segments by region. It also segments, so we've got male full-time, female full-time. So it also segments by gender. So we've got region by gender, and it gives us percentiles. The downside of this is that's 2023 data. So I had to tweak the headline slightly. So instead of who is being paid less than minimum wage, it's who needs a pay rise to come in line with the 2024 minimum wage, because the minimum wage was increased in April 2024 from, I think, £10.56 an hour to £11.44 an hour. So what I did was I put all this data together with the 10th percentile, the 20th percentile, and the 30th percentile. And from this, I assumed that there's a normal distribution between these percentiles which is an assumption on my part. It probably isn't a normal distribution, but I just assumed it so I could work out the exact percentages of people earning less than minimum wage by gender and by region. I also took into account the fact that it says here the youngest workers, those aged 16 to 24, make up 10% of the workforce. So since 21 is halfway between 16 and 24, I assume that 5% of the workforce is under 21. So I multiplied our numbers by 0.9 to get this percentage. So this is the percentage of people who need a pay rise to match minimum wage based on region and gender. The larger regions like Northwest, Southeast, Wales, Northern Ireland, they had gender-based data, so I could segment by gender for them. But the smaller regions, things like these ones, they didn't have gender-based data, so I just had region-based data. So these are the percentages I got. So anyway, this is the article that I wrote. So, how many of us need a pay rise to match minimum wage? With the minimum wage in the UK being increased by 11.44 in April 2024, we looked at the latest Office of National Statistics figures on median earnings to see how many people in the UK were being paid less than this in 2023. Please note that all our findings assume that a working week is 40 hours, so that the minimum wage is 457 a week. So key findings, we've got the overall findings, we've got the gender minimum wage gap, and then we've got the women in the East Midlands who they fared the worst in the whole study. So those are our three key findings. Then here's a table with all the larger regions and gender and the percentage who need a and the percentage who need a pay rise. And then, so that's there. And then here's the table that shows the percentage of people by local authority who need a pay rise. And this is just all of those. And again, a lot of these are like less than 10%, especially like the London ones as we go down here. Again, like we just couldn't get reliable data for anything under 10% because the bottom earners was the 10 percentile. So if they earn over minimum wage, then all we could say was less than 10%. Then I just have this but broken down. And the idea is if we can get this page to rank for the keyword how many people earn less than minimum wage, then people can just come in and copy and paste this into their article and cite our piece. So that's why I've got that here. And then I've just got a comment from Anthea Dave, who is an employment solicitor at Duncan & Lewis, who just said, the majority of occupations where salary fall under the minimum wage are in retail, care, warehousing and transportation, which is information that I got from that first data set that I looked at. These roles often have irregular hours, making it more difficult to keep a record of exactly what your hourly pay is. Although minimum wage is £11.44 an hour, this is calculated based on each individual paycheck. So if you work an average of 40 hours per week and are paid monthly, then your gross earnings must be at least £1,830 for the month. If you're worried about talking to an employer about being paid less than minimum wage, bear in mind that victimization laws prevent an employer from treating an employee less favorably because they have challenged potentially illegal employment practices. And then I've got the methodology. To find out the number of people who needed a pay rise in order to match the April 2024 UK minimum wage increase, we looked at Office of National Statistics data on gross weekly earnings in April 2023, which was this report. The report gave us percentiles of gross weekly earnings for full-time workers by region and gender, and from this we worked out the percentage of men and women in each region who are earning less than minimum wage. Since the £11.44 minimum wage only applies to people over the age of 21, we multiplied our percentages by 0.95 to account for the Office of National Statistics findings that 5% of the workforce is under 21. And then I linked to this article. Our findings assume that full-time equates to 40 hours per week. Since the lowest percentile available was the bottom 10 percentile, you could only find data for locations where 10% or more of the full-time workforce were being paid less than minimum wage. So that's why anything that didn't have that just has less than 10%. So anyway, this is the article that I created and that we're going to pitch out to journalists. And in my next video, I'm going to show you how I find journalists to pitch and how I pitch them.